You're listening to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories and the latest information from people who fight addiction every day. I'm Mike Torville, your host and author of Voices from the Fallen. Thank you for listening, for following, and most of all, for sharing with people you care about. Make your voice count too. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us at Healing Voices Project. We're glad to have you. I'm Mike Torville, and today we have a special guest. You're going to meet Lauren Sisler. Now, if you watch college football, you might already know who Lauren Sisler is, about her broadcasting career on ESPN. But if not, Lauren Sisler is a nationally recognized, award-winning sportscaster on ESPN since 2016. And not only is Lauren a powerhouse broadcaster for sports, but she's also the author of a new and very compelling book called Shatterproof. We're going to talk a lot about that book today. Now, as a sportscaster and former college gymnast, Lauren is obviously passionate about sports. But over a few years, Lauren has learned something else about herself. She is a passionate storyteller and often shares behind-the-scenes stories and perspectives of the coaches, athletes, and fans beyond the field. But today we're not going to talk about football or gymnastics, but we will talk about resiliency, courage, confronting adversity, and about the stigma of drug use in the family. Like many of you listening, Lauren's life was not always marked with successes. In 2003, as a freshman at Rutgers University, her life took a tragic turn when she unexpectedly lost both parents within hours of each other to their hidden battle with prescription drug addiction. Through her grief, Lauren has come through the darkness of shame and stigma and has found new, renewed hope. And sharing this with others, she has a message for all our listeners, and that is about confronting adversity with bravery, owning your story. And we're going to talk a lot about owning your story today. I know I've watched some of Lauren's interviews, and I think that's a really important thing. And how you can let it propel you towards a more meaningful future with fulfillment and escape the shame and escape and just jump into a more positive life away from the darkness of those types of situations. And Lauren's got a website, laurensisler.com. And I like the line, Lauren, on your website. It says, it's time to step out of your fears and learn to fall in love with your story, which you have done. So Lauren, thank you for coming. I appreciate you joining us here in Healing Voices Project.
Yes, thank you, Mike. I appreciate the opportunity. Great introduction. This is such an honor, and love to just lean into this conversation and hopefully meet some of your listeners where they're at and bring some words of encouragement.
Yeah, and I think you will. And I have to say that I feel I've gotten to know you, as today is the first day we actually met and talked, but I feel like I've known you for a long time because I've watched your videos. I've been on your website, and really I fell in love with your story. And I think you'll get people to talk about, we'll get people to learn about your book, learn about your story. And I think that's important to share. It's really important to share because the courage, resiliency, which didn't come right away. It was a process, obviously, but let's talk about that. So I feel like I've been talking too much. So let's go to you. I know we're going to talk about your story. Where would you like to begin to talk about what's behind all that occurred in your life?
Yeah, obviously you kind of, I guess, hit on the footnotes version of the story.
Yeah.
And, I'd love to kind of just hit the rewind button a little bit to take people back to sort of where all this began, right? So, I was a young, aspiring gymnast, and that was a sport that really took off at an early age for me. And I was very dedicated to it and realized that maybe I could earn a college scholarship doing gymnastics. And so I kind of put my head down through middle school and into high school and was working really hard to make that dream a reality. And so I started sending my recruiting tape out all over the country and was just excited like for this opportunity to potentially use my talents and all the dedication and time we'd put into this sport. And I say we, me, my mom, and my dad, and my older brother Alan, it was an investment, right?
Mhm.
And I just thought like, okay, here it is. And so we start sending my recruiting tape all over the country and looking at different schools, went on some official visits, and then I was so fortunate to get an offer from Rutgers. And so really excited about this opportunity to go to Rutgers and signing that college scholarship, that letter of intent. And, I'm off to Rutgers with my dreams in front of me. So excited
Mhm.
for what's to come. So excited to start my studies as a sports doctor. I wanted to be a sports doctor, thought I could help athletes get back out on the field of play. It was something I had dreamed of for a long time. And so I'm living the dream at Rutgers, and things were going pretty well. And I'm adjusting. It's not an easy adjustment going from high school to college, but I was figuring it out and having a good time
Mhm.
doing it. And so finally, as I'm navigating, my freshman year, second semester, we get to uh, midterm exams, and I picked up the phone and called my parents like I always did. It was a Sunday, and I remember calling them on the phone, checking in. Life is good, working on a new combination on bars. I'm excited. Mom wanted a play-by-play of everything, so I shared some updates with her, passed the phone off to my dad. We talked for a few minutes. He had just celebrated his birthday, and it just was like, everything seemed normal. And we hung
Mhm.
up the phone, said I love you, said goodbye, and that was it. And set my alarm clock and went to bed. And next thing you know, I wake up to a phone call from my dad.
That same night.
Same night. Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty panicked, asking
Mhm.
for my brother's number. And I was said, well, what's wrong? And he said, Lauren, I just need to talk to your brother. And he, I gave him my brother's phone number, hung up the phone, and within 30 seconds, he calls me back and he said, Lauren, your mom died. And it just came as a complete shock. Like I just talked to mom on the phone just a few hours before. Like, what do you mean? It's middle of the night. Mom's 45 years old, seemingly healthy. Like, what happened? And, I was just so shocked by it. And he just said, Lauren, I can't explain it now. Get on the next plane you can. I'll be at the airport to pick you up. And I really just had no idea like what I was in for. And I'm just frantically as an 18-year-old trying to figure out how I'm going to purchase a plane ticket. Didn't have money, $50 to my name in my bank account. So I had to use my roommate's credit card. And we just, were frantically scrambling, trying to get all this stuff done. And, pack my bags, get a ride to the airport, get to the airport, plane touches down in Roanoke, my hometown from Jersey. And, I remember just running through the terminal and wanting to jump in my dad's arms. And my uncle,
Right.
my cousin pulled up. And, at that moment, I just kind of thought, well, my parents are, my dad's probably just taking care of things at the hospital. I'm sure I'll see him soon. We'll get in the car. We'll head back up to the house and I'll see my dad. And that's when I, worked up the courage and I said to my Uncle Mike, I said, where's my dad? And he said, Lauren, I'm sorry, but your dad's passed away too. And that was just a total just shock to the system. Like, what? And that became
What?
a new
Yeah.
reality at 18 years old.
Wow. Now you didn't know why or how they had passed.
Nope. At that moment, like, your brain is just kind of like on overdrive. Like you just don't know how to like consume that information and process it. And then you're like, okay, what and how did all this happen? Like what transpired to create this? And yeah, like I was just like completely in shock. And it would actually be several years before I would confront the truth of what happened to my parents. In that moment, I kind of just like went back to doing life, figuring out life without them. So I just stopped asking questions and just sort of like went back to doing life and figuring out how I was going to navigate these challenges and navigate being an adult, now suddenly at 18 years old and quickly having to like flip the script. Um, and so I kind of just shied away from the truth of what happened to my parents because I just didn't want to acknowledge how they died that day on March 24th of 2003.
How did you, when you talk about confronting the truth, because at some point shortly after you learned the truth of how they both died. When did you know? When did you
Yeah.
learn exactly how they
So
died?
it's interesting because we actually got the toxicology reports 90 days after they passed away. And my aunt went into the coroner's office. That's my auntie Linda, my mom's sister, who really took me under her wing, and my uncle. came back with the manila envelope that had both their toxicology reports in there and the investigative notes to determine what had happened to both of my parents. And my aunt had kind of thumbed through it and handed it to me and said, "Do you want to look at it?" And I said, "Nope." Threw it in the floorboard, and it was 10 years later that I actually finally confronted it face on, head on, and read those
Because
toxicology
what
reports.
did you think, if you didn't know what the toxicology report said, what did you think caused their death?
Well, a lot of it was me really just kind of trying to sugarcoat, gloss over what had happened. I knew my
Hmm.
mom was taking medication. I knew my dad was taking medication. Knew that they were taking medication. And so I told people, mom died of respiratory failure. Dad died of a heart attack. And that's somewhat true because my mom did actually die of respiratory failure. My dad's heart stopped.
Okay, so there is truth to that,
There
but
is some truth in that.
the underlying cause is what you were hiding.
The underlying cause is what I was hiding. So I literally would say this over and over. I don't know where I even came up with the term respiratory failure. I knew my parents were taking medication. I knew that they were struggling to manage it ever so slightly. Looking back, hindsight's always 2020.
Hmm.
But I had no idea that my parents were capable of taking the drug and altering it to a point where it would be fatal. And I think that's the part that I struggled with for so long, was that my parents made a choice to take a drug that was prescribed to them. Fentanyl was actually prescribed to my mom. My dad actually was only prescribed Oxycontin. He too overdosed from fentanyl. But I think it was hard for me to know that my parents physically altered the form of the medication and overdosed from it. So they made a choice to physically alter the drug in order to get the high that they needed to help cope with the addiction that they were experiencing. And I think that was the hardest part for me to understand. And so I just glazed over it, right? Respiratory failure. My mom was taking all these medications, like her pain just got to be too much. She just started taking too many medications. And, it's like in my mind, I could never point to overdose. I could never point to addiction. It was always just like, oh, this just, and it's crazy how my brain was functioning at that time because it was so easy for me to just kind of skate by like the realities, and so much so to the point that I believed it myself. Like I
Yeah.
believed it myself. Like I literally never could consume the fact that my parents died of overdose. And it took years to get to that point where I could literally look you straight in the eye and say my parents died of overdose.
Yeah. And it took 10 years, you said.
10 years before I opened those tox reports and said, all right, this is the facts, right? If it's on paper. And that's why I dodged that report for so long, is because if I saw it on paper,
Hmm.
then I had to acknowledge it as truth.
After that, now that you know the truth, you say, okay, when people ask me, am I going to tell them what I know now? Am I going to continue to sugarcoat it a little bit? What changed that made you say, all right, I'm going to be completely honest about this? Something had to have changed in all that time. Which what did change for you?
Oh, yeah. What changed for me is now, and I want to preface this by saying we're sitting here and I give you the 2-minute version of this. Y'all, this was years and years and years in the making. And I share that because I think sometimes it looks like this was easy, and that people that are going through something similar, well, this was easy for her. I should be figuring this out. Like I should be getting over this, right? No, this took me years. And it was really just unboxing and unpacking everything. And a lot of it was my auntie Linda, literally over the years, lovingly trying to share what happened with my parents, telling the truth, in which I would fight her on it. And you're destroying mom and dad's legacy. You're telling lies, and like literally would just go in circles with her. And like just would get angry. And I just remember like doing everything I could to push her away and push the truth away. And so she would just kind of step back and say, okay, like, yeah, okay.
Mm.
And finally she helped me over the years, slowly but surely. I look at it like a brick wall. I just built this brick wall around myself. I just built this fortress to try to avoid the shame that was creeping in, and the anger and the guilt and all the things. I just built up this wall, and she really just brick by brick tried to take that wall down and help me to see the truth in everything in a loving way and say, look, your parents aren't defined by how they died, but by how they lived their lives. And now you can carry on that legacy. And when I started to acknowledge that and recognize it and say, okay, here is the truth. This is the truth. It doesn't change how they died. It doesn't change how they lived their lives. These were amazing people that supported and loved me and my brother and my family and our friends so much. But ultimately they came, you know, you know, succumb to this addiction that ultimately, you know, uh, was the end result of their lives.
And they kept it from everyone. No one knew.
They were
Right?
so good at hiding it. So
Yeah.
good at hiding it. I mean, we all were just like, what? You know, my dad was an alcoholic, so there was some tinge of like addiction there, but
Okay.
like never in a million years. Like he managed it, went to his VA meetings, went to his AA meetings, like everything seemed like it was under control. There was no concept for me or anybody else that like they were abusing their prescription medication, like that this was a major issue.
It never even occurred to you that that was happening. No.
Nope. Mm-mm.
Wow. Well, and you're right. And it's often the case with somebody, it's not an immediate recognition because it is hard. It takes time, it takes years, in your case, 10 to finally have this sink in and say, okay, what now? How do I talk about this? And at some point, you said, not only am I acknowledging it, but I'm going to share it. I'm going to tell somebody, and there's a purpose to sharing. It's not just because you think about people going through similar situations, and you can certainly relate to what they go through. How can you help them? How do you find that what you've gone through and what you're doing now by sharing your story, how do you see how it's received by people?
That's the key. Because I will say, you know, being that I ran from reality, ran from the truth, 10 years after my parents died is when I opened those tox reports. That's the first time that I actually came out publicly, like in a public setting versus like, you know, a person here and there, a colleague here and there that I would share the story with. This was like the first time that I like broadcast it out to the world. And what's wild about it is I had this just fear, like people were going to judge me and they're going to judge my parents and they're going to think differently of us. And I will say that of anything, number one, I experienced some level of freedom, right? And I talk about the shackles of shame just started to bust
Yeah,
wide open. Okay.
yeah,
Then it's the peace and closure that I was seeing coming from others. You know, my parents, colleagues of my parents that always wondered, like, what happened to Butch Sisler that day? What happened to his wife, Leslie? Like, we want to know. And I think that there is just some level of peace that comes with it. And the best part about it is nobody loved my parents any less. Nobody loved me and my brother any less. Like, if anything, they loved us more and wrapped their arms around us and said, wow, like your parents were going through this. And I wish we'd asked more questions. I wish we would have leaned in. I wish we could have gotten them help. I've got someone in my family that's going through this thing. So all of a sudden, it's like you've given people permission to say, hey, I've got a story too. Hey, I'm dealing with shame. Hey, I'm dealing with addiction. Hey, I'm dealing with this thing. And you give them now an opportunity to overcome that. And I think that is just, you know, such a blessing and really just a gift now to have this freedom and knowing that like I have a gift that I can give to other people by simply sharing my story.
yeah. There's something very therapeutic about sharing a story for both sides, both for the sharer and the listener, as
Hmm.
you've learned, and hence the how effective groups are. And by people sharing a story, it is very therapeutic. It gives you that freedom, a release, and you felt that way as you described. And you're hearing from others that have heard your story. Are you hearing the similar types of feelings that you experience from others?
Yeah. I mean, just, the feelings of, I think that vulnerability piece is so
Yeah.
big, the transparency piece, because I think it's so easy for us to bottle things up and keep everything just like locked in a box. But I think
Well,
it's
that's
so
common. Yeah.
important, right?
Yeah.
Like to get that stuff out there. And so I think that I'm seeing other people responding to it and saying, you know what? Like through all of this, like I've learned to fall in love with my story. I've learned to accept all the things that have been have been just weighing on me for years, whether it's a divorce, an infidelity, a decision, a lost job, lost wages, declaring bankruptcy. I mean, there's a million things that people go through that create shame. And I think it really has given people the courage to step into it instead of lean away from it and say, hey, this is adversity, this is life, but now I can use this in a way to bounce back and build resilience and um, just be a better person for it.
Hmm. Yeah, and if you talk about owning your story or falling in love with your story, at first maybe some people don't understand why. Wait a minute, this was a tragedy. Wait a minute, this is tore my life apart. But there's something more than that. Obviously, by sharing your story, you get that sense of release. You get that feeling that yeah, there's something more than just dwelling on that aspect. But the fact that you can help heal others, that others relate and connect to you more so than you probably ever imagined.
Yep. And I think that's it. It's connection, right? It's this
Yeah,
connection that you develop and you grow between people. And I think
yeah,
that's what's so beautiful about it is like you just see this like ripple effect, right? You talk about it, you open up, you share, and then it's like, wow, like this is amazing. And then you just realize like so many people are going, you're not alone in all this, right? And I think it's just owning that and leaning into that and knowing like now if I share my story, someone else opens up and then it's just that ripple effect like I said that just gives people permission to open up to share and to feel confident in where they're at. Even if it feels like the darkest day, right? I look back at that day, March 24th of 2003, never imagined I could be sitting here like having this conversation and I'm just so grateful for it, and you talk about the book, like I never thought I could put together 230 pages worth of like a story that's book worthy, like hello. And, then I'm like, here we are, it's just amazing to me to be in this spot, to be able to just lean in and to give people something that they can lean into and take with them on their journey. And again, it's not an overnight process. It's not linear. There'll be good days, there'll be bad days. You'll peek around the corner, you open the door, and then there'll be other times you slam the door shut. But that's the
right.
beauty of it all, right? And it's all in the journey. And I'm just grateful for it. And I just want to encourage people, like meet them where they're at, and just know this is a process. It is a journey. It's not going to happen overnight, but you got to start somewhere. And that was the one thing when I was just literally flunking out of school, Mike, drowning in my sorrows, so sad and grief mode when I was at Rutgers. Like I was literally losing everything I'd ever worked for and dreamed of. And really my coaches, sat me down and just between my coaches, my family, my teammates, just those surrounding me said, Lauren, like, we love you. We're here for you. We got resources for you, but you got to be willing to stand up and take the first step. Nobody can do it for you. Right. And so you've got to make that decision and you've got to have that courage to stand up when sometimes it's easier just to unpack your bags where you're at and say, you know what? This is life. This is where I'm at. I'm not moving forward. We're going to stay here forever.
Yes, too often that happens when people sort of drown in the sorrow and just become a recluse and start to shut off. And I know that's difficult. And I know that we talked about connection earlier, but the connection with your coaches and family members helped you through it. You couldn't have, I don't imagine you could have done it very well alone.
Right.
Uh, and I, when we hear people come on our program, and I've had several people come on who haven't had you public speak all the time. You're a natural at it. It's your job.
Well,
Um,
I mean,
and there's others that are shyer about sharing their story, but they know they'd like to, and they come on. And I've had several people say, I'm so nervous. I'm never done this before." And in a few minutes, that starts to shed, and they start talking. And often I can't stop them from talking. It's amazing
yeah.
transition. And then
Yeah.
afterwards, what happens is they just, wow, that felt great. And I heard that so often. It
Yeah.
just felt great.
Felt great.
And
Yep.
I may do this more, right? And so you feel like you're breaking through that wall that you talked about, and
Uh-huh.
but it doesn't happen, as you said, overnight. It took you years, years and years to do that. Um, I was going to ask you what you just talked about is going through those first years, having to go back to college and went through. Did you graduate uh, as planned? Um, any hiccups with that, or did you just plow through
Nope.
and go through?
2006 was the plan. I still graduate on time. I wanted to be a sports doctor, switch majors to a sports reporter, figured
Mhm.
it out, and yeah, here we are.
There you are. Wow. Now tell us what prompted the book. I mean, you've told your story many times. What prompted the book, and how was that process?
I think a lot of it was just like, when's the right time? When's the right time? When am I going to share my story? Because so many people, you need to write a book, you need to write a book. Like, and I
Mhm.
think a lot of it is because I get so many questions and I just don't have the capacity and bandwidth to be able to answer all those questions in depth every time I get them, and
Yeah.
especially when I'm at speaking events and stuff like that. So I want to give people a resource and a tool to say, like, yeah, like this is awesome, like something that I can give them to like take home with them and read through and understand a little bit more of the depths of it all and then say, hey, like here we are. Like this is this is where I'm at in my life and this is where I want to be, and getting some of that guidance and stuff. So I really think for me it was just kind of like I hit that sort of intersection, right? Where it was just like, okay, trust in myself, trust that it's worthy of a story, trust that it's worthy of a conversation, and get it all on paper. And so I work with Highbridge is the publisher I worked with, and it's a hybrid publishing company. And so I just kind of had to trust myself in the process and say, I don't know what I'm doing, I have no clue how to be an author, but I'm going to lean into some people that do and see what
And you did it
happens.
anyway. You did it
Did it
anyway.
anyway. That's what I say,
Yeah,
jump scared, baby, jump scared.
exactly. I think that's awesome. And I'm going to tell you something. When I wrote my book that we talked about earlier, the book Voices from the Fallen, there was 8 stories in there, and that book was exhausting. I was so emotional. I cried through writing that book. It was just took so much out of me. And then after, it was so good to finally finished it. And I had several people afterwards come up and say, "Hey, Mike, there's a story here. Here, can you write my story? Can you write that?" I said, "Whoa, whoa, writing it, that was an exasperating experience. I don't have the energy or time because it was so challenging." So I
Yeah.
said, "I have a better idea how we can share stories." Um, Hence the podcast. I said, maybe we just do a podcast where we have people on and
Yeah.
talk about that.
Have some
Now I'm
conversations
finding,
around it, right?
yeah, and I think it's just the up because you were doing the talking, and they say, hey, maybe I'll just write a book about it. And I'm finding podcasting is just as much work as writing a book.
It is a lot of work. Yes, I know. I know.
Yeah,
You get yourself in it and you got to keep going. I mean, that's,
yeah,
yeah.
right. But
Woo.
at
Yeah.
least
It's like just
yeah,
catch your
yeah,
breath. But I love that too,
exactly.
kind of bringing that because it is, and anybody that has the drive and or will to, move forward with writing a book, it is a labor of love. And it's something like, I mean, it has taken a long time to get here. And, we had several dates marked on the calendar of when we wanted to be done and when we wanted to promote this. And then it was just like, now's not the right time. And it's just been all over the place. But, I do think that like getting it on a paper, so start somewhere. I mean, and it's one of those things, if you have the drive and the story and the want to, and just want to get something out there, get it on paper, get your thoughts together, and then start thinking about how you're going to, if you need help writing it, do you need a ghostwriter, a co-writer, a publisher, all that stuff. But just start somewhere. And that's what I would encourage people. If you have something you want to share and you want to get it on paper and you want to put pen to paper, just do it. Just do it.
Mhm.
And then you can start piecing it together and figuring out the how and the why and all the other things on the back end.
Yes, getting it started, getting their thoughts written down is the best first step towards that. And you know what? One of the things I found through some couple of difficult times in my life, through a divorce and different things like that, um, I was told, "Hey, keep a journal. Keep a journal." I said, "A journal." At the time, I rolled my eyes. I said, "Oh, there's like a diary. I'm not going to bother." I said, "All right, all right." And I started writing a journal. And I said, "My goodness, that was the best thing I ever did." why? It was because I write down how I feel, and it might be miserable, I might be sad, I might be just angry about something. And then as time goes by, what I write changed. And when I look back, I could see the transformation over time that made me aware and think, wow, I have gotten past this after
Yep.
all.
Mm-hmm.
And even if
I
it's
love that.
just the intent of writing a book, a story, or just getting it out on paper can be, like you said earlier, it's a way to express and releases you
Yep.
in really a lot of good ways. So that's a great suggestion
I love
to
that.
do that. And so your book is called Shatterproof,
Yep.
and and by the way, you're in the middle of college football season. Is that when you decided to launch your book?
I know. I'm sitting here like, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. We went back and forth on it. And I was like, I don't know about football season, but here we are. October 1st has come and gone, and book launch week is here, and we are just having a good old time, and
Yeah,
gotten through and again, it is a journey. And that's the one thing too, is like the book's out. We've, done some media stuff, and then this is a long game. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so
right.
recognizing, and if one person picks up this book and just finds impact in it, like, it's all worth it. And so, that's the way I look at it too, is you can get caught up in all the numbers and the metrics and this and that and blah 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 blah, blah. Nope.
Yeah,
Like, just got to
that,
stay grounded in it. So
yeah. And I think coming through, and I think you talk about owning your story, falling in love with your story, and if others, if it can well maybe help people realize a couple things. One, yeah, maybe I should embrace my story a little differently. Maybe I should take a different perspective, and by doing that, and maybe even shed the stigma that holds people back, because it often does.
mhm.
Um, but when you do that, um, you almost become a different person. It just
Yeah.
releases so much held tension, and I think that's really um, overlooked sometimes.
Yeah,
People don't
I
talk about
agree.
it.
I
Yeah,
agree. And it's, again, the shackles,
yeah,
like, you feel it. And I think it's just when you can find purpose and meaning in those stories and recognize, like, every single chapter, good, bad, ugly,
yeah,
has significance, and it's going to shape you into who you are. And that's why I say fall in love with your story, fall in love with every single chapter, because I'm telling you, even if it's an ugly one, there's a purpose and meaning behind it. You just gotta open your eyes and listen to it. It might not come to you in the first day or the month or the year. It's been years, and I'm still learning why certain things are happening, and how to adjust and how to use that as a positive reinforcement for something. So
and I'd say for somebody to give it a chance, because you might not have the energy to say, "Yeah, I'm depressed, I'm alone, I'm just in the midst of grief. How am I going to get starting it?" And you might be surprised at how this can energize you,
uh-huh.
right?
Yep.
It has a really surprising effect.
Oh yeah.
So but as you said, it doesn't happen overnight, but at least getting started. At
Yep.
least getting
That's it.
started.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to read it. Now, how about where can people? Well, obviously, you can find the book at. Well, you tell me
Yeah, got
where.
website laurensisler.com, got a link up there. You can go to Amazon. You can pretty much find it anywhere online. So just Shatterproof Lauren Sisler and look it up. And I just appreciate the love and support. It means a lot to me. And, it's just been a blessing. And I hope that this is something that can bless one of you all that might be listening today. And, love to connect with you. Reach out on social media and say hello. And, again, everyone has a story. So now I encourage you to fall in love with your story.
That's perfect. That is just perfect. And well, we'll be talking, and I'll probably oh, I knew there was something I was going to say, and I can't find it. You know, when you have something in your head and you just forget it.
Uh-huh.
You
That happens
reminded
a
me of
lot.
something, and now it just popped out. So I'm sorry about that. Um, well, Lauren, I really appreciate your time, and it was just wonderful talking to you. As I said, I feel like I've gotten to know you just by, and I feel others are going to feel the same way after
Yes, thank
listening to you.
you.
Yeah.
I so appreciate it, Mike. Thank you for all your encouragement, and thank you for this opportunity to spend some time with you and your listeners.
Yeah. And thanks again. Yeah. So everybody, thanks for listening. And please check out laurensisler.com and look for the book Shatterproof on Amazon and other book outlets. And good luck with this. This is going to be wonderful. So,
Thank you.
all right. Thanks.